I'm going to try to make the clicker here work. Do you? Okay. So if you want to go ahead and pull up my slide. Thanks for letting me come talk to you guys. I can go to the next slide. Thanks. Peter already sort of explained who Dow was, so I won't spend any. If you didn't catch the facts, they're on the slide there. One of the things he did mention briefly, but I'll reiterate, is we are one of the few chemical companies with their own internal engineering groups left. So we have about 2,500, 3,000 engineers supporting our capital program globally. So my perspective really is, how does an owner do its own capital work and feed its own life cycle? So we do about 50 to 20% of our work with EPC firms. So we still have the need to influence and partner with our EPC partners, but we also have to look at ourselves pretty hard and say, why aren't we getting there? For 80% of the capital, we do it ourselves. We should be able to do that handoff well. We should be able to set up our life cycle systems. And yet we still struggle. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about why that is, or why I think it is, personal opinion. So where have I personally been? I joined Union Carbide as a process engineer back in 1978, and that does mean I've been around the industry 37 years. So though I look very young for my age, I've been around a little bit. I came up through the ranks in Union Carbide in engineering, ran some plant engineering organizations, worked on some large capital projects, and ended up as an engineering automation leader. At that time, Union Carbide was shedding its internal engineering and moving to using EPC firms. So I got to experience that transition. And then obviously in 2001, Dow Chemical bought Union Carbide. And I joined them as the global work process owner for the capital work process. So it was a very, and they're also in the front-end loading team in Houston. So it was a very interesting thing to have worked in one company for 20 years, gone to a new company, and seen what was very similar and what was very different. Because I think when you go look at doing capital work, it's the same work. But how a company chooses to organize itself, set up roles, and define different deliverables it can be very different. In fact, I remember in one of our transition meetings, I don't know if many of you knew Bob Donahoe, he and I spent 2 hours arguing about something, and it turns out we had called different things the same words. So it was 2 hours of confusion. We thought we were talking about the same thing, but we were not. So I think that's one of the challenges as an industry, is how can we standardize our vocabulary, and before we start arguing, make sure we're talking about the same thing. So back then I was engaged in the owner-operator forum at that time, which was a group of owners trying to get together to say, could we align in setting our requirements to help the software vendors understand what it is we really needed and what was of value to us. I was there at the start of Fiatech, and then I sort of stepped away from that from an organizational standpoint and focused more on work process improvement internally. So when I was asked to come talk, I said, well, what could I bring, right? I'm not up to date in the technology. I'm not a process automation professional. I don't know IT that well. And I said, well, what I can bring to the table is just my perspective of what's changed in 10 years. So that's what I thought I'd share with you today. But I am going to go back to basics, because I do know some things, okay? I know that from an owner's perspective, asset lifecycle management will only work when we balance the cost with the technology. Will only work if we understand the risk we're asking the folks, the users of that technology, to take, and that we truly understand the value of the knowledge capture we're trying to do. Because I do think it's knowledge capture. It's not just data capture. It's not just document capture. You need the data with the context. Was it based on assumption when you picked that pump? How much did you really know? when you made that vendor selection. So it's a lot of context that has to come with the data. And I think that's part of the challenge, is we try to either capture the documents, which has the context with it, or we try to capture the data, but somehow we have to put those two worlds together. So maybe it's digitizing knowledge instead of data that we have to look at. So I am focused on sort of the 13% of the total life cycle cost. 87% of the value is in the back end after engineering turns it over. And I know Ray's going to talk about that a little bit more. But I am saying that the capital project handover and the knowledge captured during the design of a capital project is the first point where you truly consolidate knowledge that says, here's how I describe this facility. And right now, when we hand that over, I think we're losing most of that knowledge. So I think one of the things we really want to look at is, how can I easily capture as much knowledge as practical? Not possible, but practical, so that when they need that 7 years later, they don't have to go digging in the files to try to find it. So I don't think you can capture all the knowledge or all the data, but there's a core set that operations and maintenance will likely need down the road at some point. And if we have it in one place at that point in time on the capital project, we should capture the value at that time, and then also work with them to say, well, how will it be maintained? How will the data or the knowledge be maintained as the facility operates and changes? So I like to think of it as knowledge generation, knowledge transfer, and knowledge management versus data or information or documents. It's all different medias for capturing the knowledge. And as Peter mentioned this morning, we're in a unique point in Dow history. We have one ERP system on the ground. We have one maintenance system on the ground. We have one set of engineering tools on the ground. And so we have an opportunity to straighten it out now, or we'll begin to customize it, or in Dow land it's called Dowize it, and we'll lose the value, because once you begin to have more than one of something, automating the interfaces becomes more complex, and the barriers to integration increase. So we're at a unique point in our history as a company. So that's what I do know. What's different now than when I left you guys 10 years ago? Because I did come to an art conference about 12 years ago. So what's the same and what's different? I think then we were trying to get the owners to agree that we could align, that it would be okay. We weren't giving up competitive advantage if we got together and said, this is what we really want, or this is what we really need. But I still think as a group of owners, we're still struggling, as Ralph was mentioning, in defining the value. Within our companies, we still remain pretty siloed. We have engineering, construction, maintenance, IT. So it's hard to see the value, because the value truly is in the white space between the functions. So I think that remains an opportunity. When I left you guys 10 years ago, there was quite a bit of discussion on which standards would win. It very much felt like a battle of standards, or standard bodies. I guess I see it settling down some, but we didn't end up with one perfect standard that solved world hunger, which is probably good, right? Because I don't think we could afford that. But I do think it's settling down and say, okay, well, we really need to get to the point where this standard talks to this standard. We're pretty cool now that you're going to keep that one and I'm going to keep this one now. Let's talk. But I do still see, because we have engineers working on those standards, I see a need for perfection still there. And I don't think we can build a standard that meets all cases. I think we need to really look at what's the core data or knowledge that we use over and over again, because that's where the value is. So we're preventing ourselves from getting that value by trying to make it perfect versus just starting and taking a step forward. So our approach will be very multi-generational. Maybe I can only capture 50% of the instrument data out of my engineering tools right now. Okay, let's capture the 50%. That's 50% less retype, because I am retyping data. I'm printing off engineering drawings and retyping it into SAP. So let's take a first step, learn where the rest of the data sits, and then begin to look at where's the value. Is it worth building an interface or not? And then last but not least, I think the technology promise was there. I did feel 10 years ago a lot of smoke was being blown in my face. No offense to any vendors in the room. I think it's more real. I think it's real. I mean, I go home, I have it, right? My kids have it on their iPads. They have more computing power than I had 10 years ago on their iPads. But I think we're not jumping on as owners because we don't understand the risk. And I think when you talk to me, you confuse the heck out of me. I understand how to do capital projects. I don't understand when you're trying to tell me what your software will do. So you gotta figure out how to explain it to me a little bit simpler. Okay? Even when you start quoting standards, acronyms are interesting animals, but once you understand an acronym, you understand it, right? So I stepped back and I said, well, why haven't we made more progress as owners? And I really looked at Dow. I say really there's 4 underlying reasons, I think. We still have cross-functional barriers that we have to overcome as a company. Folks doing capital for a living don't understand how facilities are operated and maintained. Folks doing maintenance don't understand how capital projects run and how construction builds. So we've got to start talking to each other and really understand where the value is. Again, until recently, we had multiple operating and maintenance systems. We weren't going to automate 10 different ways, right? You got to get on a common platform as an owner. And then I think the toughest nut it'll be to crack is you got to care about the accuracy of the data. Otherwise, no one's going to trust it. So no one's not going to maintain it. So I think Kevin's going to talk about that later this afternoon. That's a big cultural change for us. We just moved a lot of data into SAP, and it wasn't all good data. And it's not all pretty. So I think as an owner and those interfacing vendors or whoever's we're asking for data, there needs to be good data. We write data requirements into our contracts. Are they always delivered on by the vendors or the EPC firms? No. So do you give up? No. You keep trying and say, this data is important to me, it has value to me. I will not pay you until you give me good data, right? So I think we have to work through a cultural change around that. And then last but not least, we have to step out of the capital project world because no capital project can afford to put new technology in, right? They're in a hurry, they want to get built, they want to get designed. They don't want to talk to you about new technology or any technology, even any kind of small change. So we have to do some more of a top-down, and Peter talked about it today, productivity improvement. We've got to come in from the top and say, we're going to take this risk. Project A, please help us be the first. Yes, we understand there's a risk there, but we need you to take this step with us. So we have to be able to come up higher than a project and drive the value for the company. I think that the challenge is the value is in the big projects. But I don't know if any of you have read Ed Murrow's book. We're doing bigger projects faster and they're failing more often. So if you're saying to yourself, I'm going to go for the biggest bang on the biggest projects, I think it won't work because they're already risky. So one of the approaches we're going to do is let's pick a smaller project, prove the concept, prove the technology, and then go after the big bucks. Now you've got to manage your stakeholders because they want the value. Peter wants $1 billion, right? We got to go get it, but we got to go get it smartly. Because having one of these big suckers fail is not a pretty thing for a company to go through. So I think we have to be judicious in where we tried our new technology, but I think we can, working together, take a small step, take another step, learn from it, and continue. So we will go after a 25% field labor productivity. that advanced work packaging is promising? Will we go there all at once? No. We'll begin to change our deliverables. We'll begin to look at our material flows and say, how do I get the right material with the right data to the craft worker so that he can do his job better, faster? So I think the key is to say, understand the whole, but break it into manageable pieces. And then I will, as we do that design, we'll also make sure we know what we're handing off. It's a very complex thing. It's a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that a capital project gathers that needs to get handed off to operations and maintenance with very different perspectives. The finance guys want a different data structure than the maintenance guys do. We need to get all the not just the data, but the documents straightened out into the libraries so they can be used and maintained. So there's a lot of stuff to hand off, and then there needs to be a strategy on how you get the data back as it changes, because you know it will change. Right? The day the plan starts up, you begin to change it. So there's a big feedback loop we need to work on. So where I am right now is very hopeful, but I know as we even go down farther the chain, the value is even larger. But we've got to start somewhere. We've got to get good data in the maintenance system, and then we can go after help maintenance, improve maintenance. So information management, reduce maintenance time costs by how much? When you have a good system, how much does it save you? What's your guess? C? No, it's B. 20 to 30% of your maintenance time and cost can be saved if you have good information out in the field. Okay? Now, how much is that worth? So how much do we lose right now? Suboptimal maintenance. C, I got a C, D, D, $100 billion a year. So the big bucks in the back end, but the capital projects need to get the right data to them to start it up. This is what the FIATech organization is working on right now to help that, and Ray's going to talk more about that. So as one of the owners who was there at the beginning, I'd like you to come and play. We're going to have a conference in April, and that's what I think is different between now and 10 years ago, because we're making progress. Slowly, but we're making progress. Thank you.